So, how do events such as the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games help drive up numbers of people wanting to come here?
I think a lot of the increased numbers depended where you were and whether you'd got lots of facilities. Our facilities didn't change when the Olympics were finished. We had a small intake, but we didn't have a huge surge like some clubs have. But I think most of those were probably in the London areas.
So, do you think it's important then that Olympic legacy and everything is nationwide rather than just in the city it was based?
I think yes, it ought to be, because athletics is important to people. It's an important activity. We've found from the children that we've taken on that it's given them direction, and it's given them the ability to concentrate. Some of the athletes that we've had perhaps would have taken different routes which wouldn't have been quite so successful or might have been outside the law, but the fact that they have to have a structured and have to be determined to do what they're doing, it's given them a good foundation for life.
So obviously with the London Olympics coming in, a lot of money comes into UK sport. How much does Stoke City Athletics get from that?
None.
How do you keep funded?
We fund ourselves from our membership funds and from our membership charges, and also any fundraising. We don't have any sponsors of any sort.
Okay, so do you think it's important then that the money from the Olympics is shared out amongst the local clubs?
It would have been nice to have got some, and my understanding is that it should have been sent out to grassroots, but we haven't seen any. Nothing materially here. Whether it's been used to as a fund for funding coaches or the infrastructure of athletics, I'm not quite sure, but materially we haven't seen any extra funding here.
Okay, so how difficult do you think it is for elite athletes to come out of places like here when you don't get as much funding as other people?
Well, we've had quite a few elite athletes. We've got some athletes that are competing now. Ashley Nelson is a Stoke athlete. Jasmine Sawyers is a Stoke athlete. There's Ben Williams is a Stoke athlete. He moved over to America. They can get some funding. Once they've got to a certain level, they'll get funding from UKA, but it's the in-between when they're trying to achieve that standard. That's the difficult time, and it has to be personal funding then.
So how much work does Stoke City put into getting the local athletes in? How much work goes into putting adverts in newspapers or social media?
We've got social media, we've got a website, and we've got a Twitter page, and we advertise through those. We don't tend not to advertise through the local papers. And it's word of mouth. Mostly children bring children, or we're now finding that the athletes that we had, because I've been here for a while, the athletes that we coached when they were younger are now bringing their children to be coached here. So it must have been a happy experience. But it is difficult, and as I say, we go into the schools, we support the schools, so we hope for some feedback from that.
So how do events such as the London Olympics and the Commonwealth Games help drive up participation levels?
I'm not quite sure that they have driven up participation levels as such. We have no real influx of athletes any more than we had on any other year in 2012 or post 2012, to be honest. The sort of things that we have done to try and drive participation up here is to take on athletes at a younger and younger age, hence the very large group of young athletes under 11 that we currently have, something like 40 to 80 athletes, but they don't come as a direct consequence of the Olympic Games. They're a little bit too far removed from that. They come because they want to come and they enjoy doing what they're doing.
So if it's not the big events that drive up participation levels, what do you think gets kids into athletics?
I think you have to provide an environment where these days the kids can find real enjoyment in what they're doing. So it can't be too dogmatic, it can't be individual discipline based. It needs to be probably a multi-skills environment where you chop and you change what they do week on week and session on session, because I think when you've got young kids then their attention span is very short. So you know, trying to buttonhole them into one particular event is quite difficult. So enjoyment is the key thing here, and the fact that they see they're achieving something.
So obviously big events like the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games bring a lot of money into UK athletics and UK sport. Do local clubs like yours see enough of the money, or?
I don't know that we've seen any of the money. I don't know where that money goes. It certainly doesn't come down to the grassroots levels of sport. One of the things with getting cash into the sports is they come in. It has to, if you want to get a sponsored cash from either England Athletics or wherever that funding is coming from. It's got to be for unique projects. It doesn't help us on a day-to-day basis to run our club or to support the kids who are already in the club. So it's things maybe like setting up disabled athletics within your own organisation. You'll get funding for that. But if I want to say I need some money to fund the buses to go to our league meetings, I won't get anything for that. There's no money in the funding for that.
So do you think there's maybe a bigger responsibility on the big organisations to get the money into grassroots
I
athletics?
think there's always a responsibility, because if you don't get it into grassroots athletics, then where's your next Olympic champion going to come from? And you know, a good proportion of the money, a huge proportion of money, is spent on the very few top level athletes, which I guess we have to do because they're professional athletes, full-time athletes, and they need to, if not earn a living wage, have enough money to live on while they're in their sport.
Do you think maybe there's also responsibility on the athletes themselves? I mean, they get the funding. Do you think it's maybe their responsibility to say, you know, I've got enough funding, maybe put it back into grassroots so you can get more of me coming through?
You could, yes. I mean that is an option. You see that happening in the football through the football clubs. They make a huge amount of money and they feed that back into the system through their academy work. Don't see a lot of that coming through in athletics. So that is one option. But there are so few. If you imagine how many athletes that are on, if you go on to the UKA website and look into world-class performance and have a look at the number of athletes, it's not a huge number of athletes, and not many of those are earning sufficient money to be able to put some aside to go back into sport. They generally put back into sport through mentoring or going back into coaching when they finished their actual athletics career themselves.
Okay, so you've obviously been in coaching for a number of years and head coach here for a very short time. How much has the world of athletics grassroots changed in your time?
I think it's changed enormously. When I first started, we used to get hugely talented youngsters coming in who you didn't have to teach too much. They could run, they could jump, they could throw naturally. Finding more and more now that kids, when they come to us, you have to start right at the very bottom. You get very few of the naturally talented athletes. You've virtually got to manufacture those athletes. How much of that is down to the way we live today as a society, you know, spending a lot of time sitting on backsides at computers, tablets, mobile phones, whatever it is, I don't know. Which is one other reason why we set up this young group to come in. So we brought them in at a young stage, started at the bottom, so that when they were then able to perform at a reasonable level, they could then be passed on to the other coaches within the club. So rather than me getting somebody who's absolutely raw and trying to fit them into a group which is already working, you've got somewhere to put them where they can learn and grow at their own rate, at their own pace.
That's everything.
Okay.
Marvellous.
Good.
Thank you.